Hi, Chris.
Good
Welcome.
evening and welcome to our June 21st regular Board of Selectmen meeting. I ask we rise to the Pledge of Allegiance and to remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And please remain standing for the moment of silence for the Orlando terror attack. Thank you. We'll start the meeting by overviewing the agenda for tonight. We will go over our May 31st and June 7th meeting minutes. We'll go on to community relations, announcements, and open forums. We have 4 items under appointments and resignations tonight. We have an appointment for an alternate plumbing and gas inspector, an appointment for a board of registrars. We have an appointment for 2 full-time temporary highway laborers, and we have a reappointment for terms expiring June 30th, 2016. We have 2 scheduled appointments tonight. At 6:45, we have a school transportation discussion with Senator Goby, Representative Durant, and Representative Frost. We have a 7 o'clock Government Study Committee scheduled appointment. Under new business, we have a request for a 1-day special license. We have a request for a toll road, and we have interdepartmental transfers. And then we'll move on to old business, then committee reports, Board of Selectmen policy review, and then the town administrator's report. And that'll be followed by other business unknown at the time of posting. Our next meeting will be July 5th. And with that, we will go to our minutes of our meetings for May 31st. What is the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Cooper.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion second to approve our May 31st special selectmen meeting minutes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Yeah, chair votes aye. Mr. Singer abstains. Motion passes. What are the board's wishes of our June 7th regular meeting minutes?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Move on to announcements. The Bittersweet Country Crafts will be holding an open house on June 25th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at 4 Dresser Hill Road. There'll be games, refreshments, and a petting zoo, so come and enjoy the day. The town hall will be closed on Monday, July 4th, in observance of the 4th of July. The Charlton Fire Department would like everyone to wear a live vest when working or playing on water. A personal flotation device, or PFD, will save your life when you need it to. Many experienced people, good swimmers too, have drowned because they were not wearing a personal flotation device when something went wrong. There are many models and types out there that will suit your needs. If you have any questions, please feel free to call the Charlton Fire Department and they'll give you more information on that. Mark your calendars. There will be a Household Hazardous Waste Day Collection Day on Saturday, June 25th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Casella Waste Service Facility at 165 Barefoot Road, across from the landfill. This event is open to Southbridge and Charlton residents only. No food or sanitary waste will be accepted, no commercial waste will be accepted, and no latex-based paints will be accepted. With that, any other announcements? Anyone here for open forum? Seeing none, we'll move on to our first appointment. Our appointment for the alternate plumbing and gas inspector, Ms. Craver.
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Peter Starkis, our gas and plumbing inspector, asking the board to appoint Paul Mazika from 20 Newton Avenue in Oxford as an alternate plumbing and gas inspector for the town of Charlton. This would allow him to perform inspections in the absence of Mr. Starkis. He has been helping Mr. Starkis for some time now, and this would make it official. I would recommend the board make the appointment.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Cooper?
I would request that we appoint Paul Mazeka from 20 Newton Ave in Oxford as the alternate plumbing and gas inspector.
Second.
Thank you. A motion is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of appointing Mr. Mazika as the alternate plumbing inspector, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to our second item, an appointment for the Board of Registrars. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from the Democratic Town Party asking the board to appoint the following to the Board of Registrars for the Democratic Party. Lisa Redmond with a term expiration of April 1st, 2017, and Geraldo Alicia with a term expiration of April 1st, 2018. I would recommend the board make the appointments as requested.
Thank you, Ms. Craver. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I would move to appoint Ms. Redmond and Mr. Alicia to
Thank you.
terms expiring April 1st, 2017 and 2018.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. Move on to our third item, the appointment for 2 full-time temporary highway laborers. Ms. Graver?
Yes, sir. The Highway Superintendent Foskett is seeking to hire 2 full-time temporary laborers for a period of 8 weeks, starting June 27th at a rate of pay at $13 per hour. 5 applications were received to fill these openings. Mr. Foskett has held interviews and would recommend the board appoint Jonathan Dion of Dudley and Justin Connor of Rochdale. I would recommend the board make the appointments.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer?
I would move to make the appointments as recommended.
Second.
We have a motion in 2 seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to our 4th item under appointments. The reappointments for the terms expiring June 30th, 2016. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a list of reappointments for the terms that will be expiring on June 30th, 2016, that are made by the board each year. The staff has been contacting current members to see if they will be seeking reappointment. The list is attached, and those are the ones who have responded at this time. I would ask the board to approve the list as provided. For information purposes, Tarek, and I will not say that name correctly,
Morskowski.
thank you, Morskowski, will not be seeking reappointment to CMRPC due to scheduling conflicts. We have asked the planning board to make a recommendation for appointment as this is their delegate. Also, Town Council Cosgrove has stated that Attorney Blatt will be leaving the office on October 1st, 2016, so the appointment should be just for him.
Thank you, Ms. Graver. And just a point of clarification, can we appoint all the people on the list?
Yes. You can refer to the list.
And then the second one for town council will be taken up as a separate motion?
No, that's
Okay.
on here, so we're just letting you know for informational purposes that we've removed Suzanne Blatt.
Okay,
Usually her name is there also to be able to assist when Attorney Cosgrove is not there.
thank you. And what are the wishes of the board then?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Cooper?
I make a motion that we appoint as recommended.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Cooper?
Is there a reason that some of these committees are only for 1 year? Should they be for 3 years?
Some of the bylaw would be, some of them are 1 year.
Such as the Boston Post Kane?
Yes,
Okay.
those are annual appointments. Many of the 3 years are things by bylaw, but your
Mhm.
subcommittees are 1 year.
Thank you. Any other discussions, questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the vote of the motion to appoint all the people on the, as recommended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. So we're a little ahead of schedule, so we'll move on to new business real quick. If I can have the indulgence of the board. So move on to our first item on new business, a request for a 1-day special license for St. Joseph's Church. And I will
Be at
keep vamping till
45.
page 45.
Okay.
Ms. Graver?
Mr. Chairman, attached is a request for a special license from St. Joseph's Church to serve wine and malt beverages from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on July 10th, 2016 in the Church Hall, located at 10 H. Putnam Road, Hill Road, for an 80th birthday party for Father Bob. This request was forwarded to the police chief, fire chief, and building commissioner, which all have given their approval. I would also recommend approval of this request.
Thank you, Ms. Graver. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 1-day license request.
Thank you.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Just want to say Father Bob looks so good for 80. Such high energy, so. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. And we'll go to our item number 2, request for a toll road for the Knights of Columbus. Ms. Craver, after all that paperwork.
Okay. Knights of Columbus Charlton Council number 11379 is seeking to conduct a Tootsie Roll Drive to benefit special needs children of the town, state, and nation. They would like to set up a voluntary toll road on Saturday, October 8th, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the corner of Main and Masonic Home Road. The request has been forwarded to Chief Purveyor for his recommendation and approval. Chief Purveyor is in support of this request, contingent upon the following safety precautions. All volunteers must wear bright colored vest, or yellow, orange, or red, or green, while soliciting donations. Orange traffic cones must be set out on Main Street and Masonic Home Road for a distance of not less than 50 feet on each respective way prior to reaching the toll station. And a minimum of 5 traffic cones on each roadway should be put in place at a distance no greater than 10 feet apart. Signs warning voluntary toll ahead must be erected on both Masonic Home Road and Main Street, not less than 75 feet from the toll collection area. Should the board approve this request, I would recommend that you consider including Chief Purveyor's recommendations into the motion.
Thank you, Ms. Craver. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the request with Chief Purveyor's recommendations.
Thank you.
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. And with that,
Okay, if we could go down now to my town administrator's report
yep, well, by my watch,
before the interdepartmental transfers, unless your time.
the official time is a little
Waiting to
early.
see if if Chief walks in. Yeah, I think this is gonna be more than 2 minutes
Yeah, I
to do
agree.
that. So I could get through the town administrator's report,
Yeah,
and then we would be ready for
Be right on time,
6:45.
perfect.
Yes?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. So reverse 911, I'm working with Chief Purveyor on the reverse 911. The chief has procured 3 quotes and is in the process of reviewing them. I expect a recommendation from the 2 of us at your next meeting. Regarding regional dispatch, as directed, I'm working with the towns of Oxford, Sturbridge, and Southbridge on the feasibility study for regional dispatch services. Previously, I informed you that we received a grant in the amount of $85,000. Our RFP has been and is being advertised with a mandatory bid conference this Thursday. The police and fire chiefs are both on the regional dispatch committee. Year-end transfers, we'll be talking about those today, but we're also gonna add to your next week's meeting an agenda item to finish up any that we still need. The finance committee will also be meeting on next Wednesday to finish up things. And police car accident, the police chief was rear-ended today. He's okay, but there is damage to the vehicle. And that's all I have right now.
Thank you. Ms. Craver, I have a question for the reverse 911, more of a request. I know some people reached out via email who were concerned about the reverse 911. Can we make sure we reach out to them and tell them, that we're looking into it again and we're looking, see what's out there. We're in the
Certainly.
procurement process. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the town administrator? Seeing none, thank you very much. Move back to our scheduled appointments. We have a 6:45 appointment for school transportation with Senator Goby, Representative Durant, and Representative Frost. And I'll continue vamping till we get back there. I would ask those in attendance would please make your way to the front.
You have the best too, so.
Senator, Representative, how are you tonight?
Just fine, thank you
Good,
for having
you
us.
Thank you so much for coming
I
out.
think we're doing better than Selectman Singer, that doesn't look very comfortable.
He's tough.
We get by.
So thank you. You
Oh.
wanted to speak a little bit about regional school transportation, just in general, or?
Yeah, just, for me, and hopefully the people of Charlton, I know that a lot's been done, and progress has been made, which is wonderful. I wanted to thank you guys for coming, because I know you guys work all day, and then they have to say, oh, I can't go home yet, but thanks for coming out. I wanted to thank you for the work that's been done. We've made progress as far as getting reimbursement back for school transportation. And it's been a big issue for me for a long time, where I say, okay, it's government's, one of our obligations is to provide an education, which we do. That doesn't sound good. Which we offer. However, just like going to university, should you choose to go into specialized school, I don't believe that should be upon the taxpayers to pay for that. But there are cases where people decide, I want a course of study that's not available in the schools that are offered here, I want to go to a specialized school. And I felt even in the high school realm, if you want to go to a specialty school or a private school, that should be on the parents to pay for their student, not the taxpayers. And forever and a day, the taxpayers have been paying for the transportation for these students that like to go to a different school because they don't want to go to the schools that we offer. I've always thought that was wrong. If they want to go to a different school, that's fine, pay for it. So we've made efforts to pursue that reimbursement and to get higher and higher reimbursements. And I think this is the first time we've actually seen a significant boost, I guess, in the percentage that we're actually getting back. So the progress is wonderful. Any update would be great. The goal, at least for me, is to have you guys continue to pursue this to the point where if the state's gonna make us do it, then it should get to the point where the state's reimbursing us 100% for the cost of that transportation. Or, like, I think Senator Brewer was working on that before he retired, to either get it reimbursed or get us where we don't have to pay for it anymore. If someone chooses to, I wanna go for a specialty course somewhere else, it should be on them.
So if I can just remind people who are at home that may not be knowing what we're talking about. I think you're referring to, we have 3 students that go to technical schools
Yes.
outside of Bay Path. We have trades within Bay Path, but we have 3 students who are going to, 2 are going to Norfolk Aggie, and 1 is going to Assabet. And your comments have been about having that as school choice versus having the towns be responsible for that transportation if they choose. So
Right.
just to let the people at home know.
Yes.
Yeah, and that has been up to almost $50,000 for those students,
Right, and I think, at one point.
just for
it was-
transportation.
Right, at one point it was a lot higher. And we do provide a wonderful education for the children here. We have the middle schools, elementary, I think our school is in Charlton second to none. We have Shepherd Hill, in addition to that, we have probably one of the best vocational schools, I think, in the state, probably in Bay Path. So I think as a community, we go above and beyond in offering the education, educational opportunities. So it's just like if I decide to go off to college, you shouldn't pay for it and you shouldn't pay for it. Or if I decide I wanna go to private school because I don't wanna go to the Shepherd Hill, you shouldn't be obligated to pay for that either. To me, this has always fallen in the same regard. We offer wonderful opportunities for education, but you decide to go to a specialty school for agriculture, that's fine. But then that family should pay for it, not everyone in town. So.
Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, you're absolutely right. When the bill comes in, when you're doing out of placements, when kids are going, as you mentioned, either to Norfolk Aggie or Smith or Assabet or wherever they're going, and that bill comes to the town. It doesn't go to the school system, it comes to the town. The town has to pay that bill. And that has been an issue, not just in this town, but in many others. And maybe probably 4 or 5 years ago now, I would say, Peter and I had both been approached by Adam Gaudette, who Robin knows well, and many of you know is the town administrator in Spencer. And because of this same exact issue, there was one student that was going to Norfolk, one that was going to Smith, at a cost of the town for the 2 kids, about $90,000. And that's, and again, a lot of times those aren't costs that they're not anticipating costs, because sometimes you don't know until sometimes maybe a week before school starts if the student is going to go to that particular school or not. And there has been a bill filed that I have filed, and I have a number of co-sponsors on, that talks about shifting that burden onto the parents. That is one aspect of it. That bill this year, the Education Committee has asked for an extension. I don't expect that the bill will pass in this session. And in fact, I spoke yesterday with Adam because he was wondering what may or may not happen for the rest, and Joe, you're familiar with, the schedule as well. And I said to Adam, I said, maybe, I said, obviously I can refile. It's been about 4 years in a row, the bill hasn't really gone that far. And a lot of it is because people don't want to put the burden back on the parents. I mean, that's basically what it comes back to. And I said to him, it may be time to take a look, and we can still file that bill, but it may make sense to file another bill that talks about perhaps forming a commission to look at this cost and the cost of other out-of-school placements, because it's not just that, it's special ed out-of-placement costs. That goes, of course, back to the schools, but, I mean, it's all the same taxpayers paying that money. So I think it may be time to really take a look and to look at all of those kind of out-of-school placements. As far as the ag school part of things, Worcester County, and you've probably heard me say this before, Worcester County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state for agriculture. The 4-H, in fact, tomorrow we're going to have 48 4-H kids from the area that are coming to do a tour of the State House tomorrow. It's growing. Agriculture continues to grow in Massachusetts, and we don't have an ag school for central Massachusetts. And that is one of the issues with having to transport, because there isn't anything here for kids. Superintendent LaFleche has been very good about trying to work with Tufts University in Grafton about the possibility, and we've talked about this for a few years, if it makes sense for kids to go to Tufts a few days a week to take those larger agricultural type classes that they have to. And you'd still have to transport, but transporting to Grafton a couple days a week is a lot different than transporting to Norfolk or down to Assabet. I don't know if that will make sense. Obviously, one of the issues that comes up is that Tufts, when I've sat down at Tufts with the folks over at Tufts, they're open to it, but they also make the point, they don't want it to be a financial burden on them, where they have to hire more staff, and things that I hadn't thought about before. When they have large animals, you can't x-ray the same horse every day. But I mean, there are things that you just can't do. And so there are practical things that have to be considered, because the students that are there are for veterinary services. So your issue is well understood. There have been trying to make some actions towards it, but it would require shifting either completely of the burden or somehow do some sort of cost sharing. And that may be another way to look at it, where the towns would be on the hook, so to speak, for some of it, where you're on the hook for 100%, and to maybe do some cost sharing with some families. Some towns also have looked at providing their own transportation, so to speak, when they know that there may be 2 or 3 families willing to do it, where the towns have said, we'd rather pay a parent a stipend to take that student and maybe a couple others to the school, and that ends up being less of a cost than having to go with an outside bus company. Some communities are looking at those as well. So, there are some other options. It's not going to be taken care of this fiscal year, and it won't be taken care of probably next fiscal year. But
Mrs. Swenson?
Senator Goby, I know this has
Yes.
been a cause that you've worked on for years, and we appreciate you guys coming. I appreciate the work on this. If someone from another town chooses to go to Shepherd Hill in the school choice program, how do they get to Shepherd Hill?
Well, that's right. I mean, unless the community, I do have some schools in my district that actually provide buses for
But in
students,
general,
but in
it's-
general,
it's-
it'd be up
it's
to the parent.
parents'
Absolutely.
And
Right.
again, while I appreciate
Yeah.
your work, I don't see the difference.
Yeah,
I really don't see the difference.
Yeah. Right.
Mrs. Singer?
I agree with Mr. Swenson, and I still want to thank you, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the effort, and I
Right.
appreciate the alternative ideas you're coming up with. And I know you know that I understand that these things don't happen overnight.
Yes.
We've made progress, and that in itself is wonderful. And I assume if we're gonna keep making progress, it's gonna take many more years to eventually get where we hope to go. I would ask two things. I know you both fight for us up there. I would ask to have it refiled, though. And
Yes.
I would ask to continue to do that and to pursue it. And when people tell you that they don't wanna support it, other legislators in Boston, because they're afraid of shifting the burden onto the parents, you may already do this, but make sure they're aware that they're doing that already, but they're doing it to everybody. They're putting that burden on every taxpayer, on every town. That's police salary, that's fire salary, that's highway. They wanna put the burden on us, but that's exactly what they're doing, but they're doing it in a manner that affects everyone in the town, not just a family.
And just when you, it would mean a lot to town to refile this. Have there been any efforts reaching out to Governor Baker's office and possibly getting some support? I know that he's been an ally with the towns, helping with the municipal modernization bill and other efforts like that. So maybe even having, Governor Baker on our side with this would possibly give it a little more, more fight when, making its way through the legislative process.
Yeah, and as Senator Goby says, I think one of the things we have to work on is some kind of out-of-the-box thinking here. I think, Rick, that's a great analogy, right? Is when if a child from Southbridge wants to go to Shepherd Hill, they've got to find their
You
own
gotta get yourself there,
transportation.
yep.
I do think we have to kind of try to find some other solutions, something that's unique. And Senator Goby mentioned it. I remember when I was a selectman in Spencer, the town administrator at the time actually gave one of the kids who turned 16 or so a gas card. Here, I'll pay for your gas in your car if you drive yourself. It would be cheaper. They're not ideal solutions, but this is a burden, and it's a burden for all of the towns in my district. Yeah.
And one possible solution is like we've been saying, a gradual solution, maybe something,
Yeah.
the first bill is 80% covered by the town, maybe something that slides over time, either in the bill or future bills will cut that down. Be a little more easier to swallow, because when these things pop up, we can't account for that. It's a huge
Yeah.
chunk of money that could, potentially sink a budget. Mr. Swenson?
And I get where this all comes from, the history of agriculture in
Right.
Massachusetts and trying to foster that. And I get all that. I just also wonder if maybe that time has passed a little bit. If it's a different time than it was when that bill was implemented. Having some kind of an agricultural school for Worcester County would be an awesome thing. Again, as Mr. Singer said, I think that's something that would be many, many years in the making. But I'm just, like a lot of bills that we see at the time that they're enacted, they make great sense and they serve a great purpose. But as things evolve and times change, I sometimes wonder if they outlive their usefulness.
Yeah.
And in this day of school choice and so many kids being mobile and how they get their education through charter schools or school choice or what have you, I'm just wondering. And I know you guys are fighting the fight, and I appreciate that. I certainly want to emphasize that, don't want to minimize it. But I'm just, I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if it's a different time than it was when this was enacted.
Well, the only thing I would say to that, though, as things continue to progress, there are going to be new things that are offered at our technical schools as well. And you may find very well that something's offered in one technical school, whether it's getting into the renewable energy field and that's a huge field. And there may be something that's going to be taught at, maybe down at Assabet, that's going to be on solar panels, on whatever, constructions. So you may end up, regardless, if it's not agriculture, there's going to be something else, because times continue to change. And I'm sure Superintendent LaFleche would tell you that. They continually try to offer new courses and new things to attract the folks of tomorrow.
Well, we do appreciate you sticking with it and refiling if you do.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And we wanted you to know that we know it's an uphill battle, so we appreciate the effort you're all putting into it.
Well, thank you.
Ms. Greer?
I know we have a 7 o'clock, but
sorry.
I
Alright.
just want to give them an opportunity if they want to say anything about the 2 legislative acts. I know I didn't ask you about that in my email invitation, but if we have the gas and we have the municipal lien.
Right, and they are all progressing,
Yeah.
and so hopefully, those will get through in the next few weeks. And I know that a lot, I won't take up a lot of time, but obviously, the information on the budget, we've tried to keep you updated as well with the potential shortfall for the FY '17, and the governor did file a 112 budget, so at least to give the folks, the Ways and Means Chairman of both the House and Senate, a little bit of breathing room, not to be under that July 1st kind of deadline, so it gives a little bit extra room to work on
Can
things.
we expect to not see any decrease in local aid?
I
Or
would
is that-
hope, I
Yeah,
mean,
I-
or is that on the
that's
table?
always, I mean, those tend to always be the sacred cows to,
Right.
with local aid, chapter 70 and chapter 90, not to touch those.
And the governor's been, I think, pretty staunch on his support for local aid, so knock on wood, I
Right.
think we're gonna be in good shape there.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a difficult year, and, you know, as far as the bills go, as Senator Goby mentioned, they're progressing. I would be remiss if I didn't say that I don't think your gas tax has much chance.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. At the state level, it's not an appetite for allowing each town to pass one of those, you know, for each town, because soon every town will be coming forward. But at least it starts a conversation on
Absolutely starts a
opening it up.
conversation.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So, any more questions for our delegation?
Just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Senator
you.
Goby,
Have a good
Representative,
evening.
thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.
Ms. Craver, we're right on time-ish for our 7 o'clock appointment for our Government Study Committee.
Yes, sir. Per the board's direction, we've invited the Government Study Committee to tonight's meeting to discuss the white paper report that they provided at town meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Coleman, thank you so much for coming, Mr. Webeck. If I know you have all your committee here, if you just want to just introduce yourselves by name for the record.
Sure. Steve Coleman, 150 Berry Corner Road, Chairman of the Government Study Committee.
Karen Spiewak, 90 Osgood Road.
Jean Benson, Casey Road.
Greg Papalardo, Brookfield Road.
We really appreciate coming out and all the hard work you've done on this. You know, it's so nice to have all these recommendations, especially, you know, having a third party look at, you know, how our town's operating, you know, what can we do better, and, you know, and provide, you know, fodder for things to work on. We know that town meeting required us to meet and talk about this before the end of the fiscal year, and just, you know, at this meeting here to talk, you know, have a discussion on, you know, just some of the highlights of the report itself, and just tell you how we're going to be, you know, taking this forward. As a committee, we're having our goals and objectives meeting next week, and, you know, some of these things will be included on that. So I'm not sure if the board, any members have anything they want to say, anything they want to ask. If you want to say anything in particular about points of it before I get into, you know, some of the highlights that I personally would like to see going forward. Seeing on, one huge thing is the human resources rep. You know, working with the town administrator on a lot of issues that are going on, is that it's time to really consider that, and there's a lot of credence, a lot of man hours from different departments. You know, not only just you know, Ms. Craver, it's all different departments that have HR components, and taking those and wrapping them and consolidating them. I think it's a great idea, and that's one of my biggest goals for this upcoming year, is to take a hard look at that piece in particular and see what those items are and how we can best, you know, bring them together. And another huge thing that really resonated with me.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Would you like to take each one and then sort of have some comment, or do you want to lay all of yours out and then we'll go back to them?
Yeah, if you actually would want, if you want to go through each of the individual recommendations, we can, you know, provide comment in discussion as a board.
Sure. Let me just go back to say, thank you for inviting us this evening. Like the town meeting warrant article had stated, we just wanted to make sure that there was some dialogue, just so a year from now, a year and a half from now, we weren't dusting the white paper off. If for no other reason, but to allow the committee members to sort of move on from this project as well. So, you know, tonight is sort of the opportunity, not that we're really, you know, going anywhere and that we couldn't be reached for comment at some other point, but sort of to bring some closure to the committee. I think tonight was important, just to kind of get any last-minute questions or answers, or some clarification for anything that may be in the report moving forward, just so you can sort of have some direction as well as you move into your workshop. So I think that was one of the goals, to have a very short window in order to have that dialogue while it was fresh in everybody's mind, and again, to sort of allow the committee itself to kind of put this thing to bed, and so they could move on. Getting back to your point relative to the human resources, That was, as it was indicated in the paper and as we had discussed many times, that was probably something that was brought up by every employee in the town. Department head and employee was the lack of a human resources component. And it was not lost on the committee, and I don't think it's lost on the employees as well, that Mrs. Craver does dedicate a lot of time to that component. And in some respects, as the town administrator, she certainly needs to be involved in, human resources, but, the town administrator should not be the human resources component. She's sort of trying to serve two masters, and it's almost, in some respects, especially if there's investigations or something that maybe happen, she's put in a situation where she's judge and jury, and it's not necessarily the best way to operate. One of the conversations, just for your information as you move forward into your workshops, this is a position that you could explore a regional effort with another community. I think the town has always tried to look at regionalization when appropriate and when possible. And the reality is that you have private corporations that have 500, 1,000, 1,500 employees that have, full-time HR components with 1 or 2 or 3 HR people. So I think this is something that Charlton is not the only community around that is in the boat of lacking a full-time human resources person. So this may be something that you could reach out to other communities as well and see if there's an interest in sharing a full-time HR professional that would have certain responsibilities. But there are still going to be components within a municipality that are going to have to exist. The treasurer's office in any municipality is going to have HR functions by virtue of benefits and those kind of things. So it's not that you're looking to completely strip what is being done in HR in the community here. It has to continue to be supported. But there needs to be someone that has the credentials and the professional training of an HR professional to sort of be steering the ship, also to give guidance to the town administrator. So that is something that you could look to do on a regional effort. You could have one person that sort of has a home base, but they maybe work for 2 or 3 other, communities, really kind of looking at the global picture of HR and making sure that we're following everything that we're supposed to be doing as far as state and federal regulations.
Absolutely, and over this year, one thing I would like to, as an office do is look at, what are the current demands, the hourly demands, the resources that are required to, that Charlton needs, and that could, have this person, work on, and that would definitely, fit into the whole regional thing.
Mhm.
Does anyone else any comments on a potential HR department or coordinator? So we'll move on to the next item. I'm not sure if you want to go through, because we have the reports in front of us on our iPads. If you have a special order you wanna go
We
through.
have the reports in front of us, so we'll answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Do you want to go down? Do you want to go through each item?
However you would want to handle this, Chairman.
And if I may just interject, for the sake of the public, if anyone is interested in seeing this white paper, our final report, they can still go to the Charlton website, correct?
Correct. I'm on it right now.
Yes.
Homepage of the Charlton website, next to the Government Study Committee, the link to the paper is there.
Oh, perfect.
And for those who do not have internet, we have printed copies here.
Yep, so if you,
Thank you.
if you go down to the selectmen's office, you can provide you with a hard copy. So I'm just gonna go through, right now we have structural changes, the charter versus bylaw. You recommended no action on that item. Department of Public Works, that's another interesting topic.
Could I talk about the charter possibility?
Oh, sure. Let's
I'm
go
just
for it.
wondering what the conversation was with the residents of the town. Was there great opposition to a charter? Is that how you came? I just don't know how you came to the conclusion. There isn't a lot in here that tells us, and I'm just curious the process.
Unfortunately, we did not get, to say that we got opposition, there would have to be someone, for the most part, that spoke up, and unfortunately, we had very little community participation. We established an email address. Our meetings were public. We had some public forums. I think we had 2 citizens, I believe, total, that showed up over the course of the 9 months that we were working. So we did not, so the majority of the people that we spoke with outside of the committee opinion and recommendation was employees. So we did not have a ton of committee feedback, residential feedback. Really kind of the driving force, charter versus bylaw, was if we had gone to a charter, there's a lot of privilege, if you will, that gets stripped away from the residents. You know, you could go to an elected town meeting or a city form of government where it's the Board of Selectmen or a council making the decision versus town meeting, those types of changes. So a charter would have given the community and its residents a lot less flexibility in decision-making than we have now. And I think it was the general consensus of not only the committee that didn't feel that that necessarily was the right direction that the community should go in, but certainly the employees and the department heads that we spoke with didn't feel that sentiment as well, that we should be stripping that power away from the citizens.
And I'd also add that we did research it insofar as looking at other cities and towns across the state who were faced with the same, dilemma or challenge or topic or whatever you want to call it. Again, not to reinvent the wheel or put words in anyone's mouth, but it's always interesting to see what others have done in a similar predicament over the years. So we did look at that.
When we had people from the MMA come out, I know you spoke to the MMA representative about this. I was under the understanding that we could still have Charlton the way it is as it's operating, and just package all of our bylaws into a charter, and basically transfer it into a charter system, but retain all of our current structure setups, and it would be easier to alter it, to update instead of doing bylaws.
Joe, I've been through this transition in a town where we went from a set of bylaws to a charter. One of the big issues that happens when you have a charter is it's a constitution. The government, the Attorney General doesn't want you playing with it too much. Once you say, this is our charter, you really can't tweak it much. You can change little things, but if you try to make major changes, they'll come to you and say, well, give us a new charter, because you're repairing it too many times.
Okay.
I've been walking, I was on the bylaw committee when we redid the bylaws. We have a lot of room to expand our bylaws. We don't have a noise bylaw in the town. There's a lot of things we don't have that we still have to develop before we're saying to the state, here's our charter, and we're gonna stand behind the charter. And that was one of my feelings about it, that I didn't think we were ready to go to a charter yet.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Is anyone having any more discussion on the charter versus bylaws? We'll move on to Department of Public Works. That was another major issue. Mr. Coleman, if you want to talk about, what was the major cause, like what was the major needs that came up in your investigations for this recommendation?
Well, one of the things that early on when we met with the Board of Selectmen, this was one of the things that the Selectmen had asked us to look into, was were there any consolidation opportunities within this, within this project. And when we looked at the possibility of creating a DPW, I guess the thing that sort of didn't make it a real workable situation was there's really no depth. If you were going to create a DPW, there would need to be some benefit in terms of sharing resources and to kind of build the depth of an organization. So currently, our water and sewer department, it's a privatized entity. The cemetery, has one full-time employee. The highway department has, a handful of employees. So even if we were to take everything that traditionally would be in a DPW, when we looked at it, you were really only gaining one employee, which was the cemetery employee, into the highway, because the other piece would still be privatized.
Right.
So to kind of go through the effort of creating a Department of Public Works to gain one employee, it really doesn't have the bang that you're sort of looking for it to have. And whereas the highway department and the cemetery, they have a good relationship now, they work hand in hand. The highway works with the cemetery when he needs assistance and vice versa. That sort of relationship already exists. So at this present time, we did make that recommendation just because there's not enough depth in terms of employees or services for that to make sense.
Right. So, does anyone have any discussion on the recommendation not pursuing a Department of Public Works?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask what page you're on?
On page 30. Oh,
Page 8.
page 6 right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So just going down through, I think it's broken down by structural changes and whatnot. And just for sake of time, I'll just go through each one. If anyone has a comment on it or a question, or if you want to explain any particular aspect on that, please feel free just to, speak up and we'll, discuss it more.
Excuse me, did you want to go to where it says committee recommendations instead of going through the changes? Or,
What page is that on?
on the report, it's page number 16, that's what I thought we were going to
Oh,
go
okay.
through, was the committee's recommendations. The other one is just sort of give you a background about how we came up to these recommendations.
Okay. This is page 6,
Page 16.
I think it's page 11 in our, yeah. So yeah, recommendations for changes. So the A would be recommend the authorization of Human Resources Director. Okay, I'm sorry. So then B is also a big one, Finance Director. That was it's another major change, and what really I know you spoke to all of the different departments. What really caused that change? Page 11.
One of the, when you look at a lot of municipalities around, they have a combined treasurer collector. So again, in kind of keeping that theme of, trying to merge departments or positions when we can, we were there. But the financial one was sort of a big one, and this was one that was kind of discussed early on, even that initial meeting with the Board of Selectmen. And as we've mentioned a couple times in our public meetings, currently the way that we're established, there's no one person within the community that can set a financial policy. The Board of Selectmen can't even set a unilateral financial policy that everyone in the town would have to follow. So by creating the position of a finance director, business manager, whatever you choose to title it, sort of similar to the school model, it would at least give one person, the ability to unilaterally make, financial, not necessarily decisions, but financial policies. Finance committee would still be in place. Everybody would have their current roles the way that they do it. But again, and as we mentioned in the report, we talk about hats and all of these hats. This is another hat that's currently worn by the town administrator, and at some point, I just think, the board, the community as a whole, we have to look at how much we're actually placing on our department heads, how much are we actually placing on people, and still expecting them to be as efficient as we, I think, expect them to be. And the town administrator plays a large role in the financial picture of the community. And the position certainly warrants that, to have some financial involvement, but maybe not to the extent that the position currently has. So I think to kind of give the town administrator's position some backup in terms of someone who's looking at the finances, more on a full-time basis, but also someone that has the authority to make unilateral decisions. And again, the example that we've used several times was, no one in the community has the position, has the authority to set a policy that says when money has to be turned into the treasurer.
Right.
So something as simple as that. Now again, that's not saying that a bylaw couldn't be created that would give the board or the town administrator or somebody else that authority. But we just felt, again, in an effort to sort of streamline things, we need somebody looking at the budget on a full-time basis. Not that the town administrator is not looking at it on a full-time basis, but when the town administrator is looking at it on a full-time basis, what is not being done?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Cooper?
I'm wondering, were you envisioning this person to be the one who would recommend the budget also and be procurement officer, all things financial or only specific areas?
I think in most municipalities, and again, I certainly can't sit here and speak for every municipality, but in most municipalities, the town manager or the town administrator remains the procurement officer in the community. But the financial director or the CFO or whatever that position is, they're the ones that work with the finance committee and then jointly with the town administrator would recommend the budget.
Any more discussion?
I have a question.
Ms. Graver?
Did you look at the town accountant / financial coordinator position and what those duties are and how that would dovetail in? I have that question, and my other question is, I think I had talked to you after the first time that you had your presentation to the public about why you were thinking of recommending that the collector treasurer be combined. So one, I'm wondering, did you guys miss that we have a town accountant slash financial coordinator? Did you have a conversation? I also want to know what the conversation was, if you had a conversation with the finance committee. How much input did they have? Did they have recommendations on that? And one of the reasons this is really important for us to look at is, as you know, we have our collector has retired. We have an assistant collector who's kind of in limbo now, who we were planning to move forward. So this certainly is something that we're going to want to look at quickly, and I do see that Virginia's here in the audience to see where we're going with this. So I guess my questions are, what were your thoughts about the town accountant slash finance coordinator? Did you have a conversation with the finance committee, and what were their recommendations? And why did you recommend the treasurer collector versus making a stronger town accountant the finance director?
Sure. We did not miss the fact that the town has that position, but the reality is the position has very little teeth. You know, the position doesn't have the authority to make unilateral decisions, you know, for finance. So the point was to have a position that had a little more authority in terms of making financial decisions. In most municipalities, as you all know, the relationship between the treasurer and collector is very close. They work together. So that is a natural transition in terms of merging positions, and many municipalities across the Commonwealth have combination treasurer collectors. The real reason why we made the recommendation for the treasurer collector to serve as the finance director was because while we were going through this process, the board hired an accountant. So that was done while this process was going on. And we truly, we didn't want to necessarily tie the hands of the town administrator or the board by saying that the town accountant would be, you know, automatically made the finance director and then, you know, given that position because it was a brand new appointment, and we didn't necessarily know whether or not that was something you were going to be comfortable with. So if that appointment had not been made during this process, I think I can speak for the committee that our recommendation would have been different. We would have made a recommendation that you hire a town accountant to serve as the finance director, and then you merge the treasurer and the collector. We did it and made the recommendation the way that we did to not tie your hands by giving a brand new employee the position of finance director, which is not what you hired that person essentially to be. So we did it to give you a little bit of wiggle room in case you wanted to go another route. Now, essentially, again, these are recommendations.
Right.
You can do whatever you want to do in terms of how you shake those out. But I think I will tell you that in most municipalities, the treasurer collector is not the finance director. It is the accountant. But again, we did not want to make that recommendation on a brand new employee who had only been here a week, and we were not sure if you were comfortable with that. So you certainly have the ability now that that person has been here a little while. You have the ability to kind of go. But under different circumstances, if that process didn't happen during this review, our recommendation would have been the town accountant serve as the finance director.
That's good to know. And the finance committee?
Yes, we gathered input from everyone. The names are noted in our minutes. So yes, we did ask finance for their opinion.
Did they have comments on this one? Did they have recommendations?
I don't recall off the top of my head
We'd have to
without
look and,
looking.
we'd have to review the minutes again.
But again, I just want to reiterate that even in towns that have charters with CFOs and that still have finance committees in place, the finance committee's role does not change. Just because you have a finance director doesn't mean the finance committee goes away and that those recommendations don't come. So the relationship essentially stays the way that it is, you know, other than the finance director has the ability to say, no, this is what we're doing today regarding the day-to-day finances and policy and those kind of things.
Quick question on the people you interviewed. Are those under Appendix A for the committee guests?
Yes.
I don't see any finance committee members on there.
We did speak to.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at the minutes. I don't recall.
Just as a point of order, I put out I'm on the list and I was never interviewed.
Yeah, same.
You weren't interviewed?
No.
You did.
You were at the
Yeah.
first
Oh,
meeting.
first meeting.
You were at one of our official, the
Oh,
first
okay.
official meeting when we met with
And-
you.
Oh, that was, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would also like to point out the public forum that we did have, and we did entertain questions and comments at
Okay.
that point as
Yeah,
well.
I was just trying to help
Yeah.
answer Ms. Clary's question. But do we have any more discussion on the position of finance director? That's something we definitely need to look at, and especially with, how we set our, overall financial policies. That's definitely something I'm personally interested in, looking at this year. So now we'll move on to the Volo Constable, which I think is a pretty, easy decision. Mr. Coleman, if you want to talk about that very briefly.
No, I think it's, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think much like, the town has had to make the decision on, moving away from certain elected versus appointed because of a special requirement or things like that. And, we noted it in the report, over the last 3 elections, our constables, have been by a write-in candidate. So
Yeah.
it's not a
95 votes
position
or
that's,
whatever.
it's not a position that's sought off after. And we did hear some stories from some constables and previous constables that we talked to that I'm not quite sure people understand the role
Right.
completely, and some of the potential sticky situations that they can get themselves into when serving different types of things. So we just felt that it's something that probably deserves a skill set that people are aware that they're getting into. So we're not putting people who necessarily, shouldn't be put in harm's way or in those situations. Constables have to deliver sometimes paperwork to residents and that are not always wind up in good or happy situations. And that's a shock for some of these constables who are write-ins that never knew that they had to do that kind of work.
Yeah, those people who just expected just to post-town meeting that be it.
Yeah, so we just felt that it was something that probably required a larger skill set that should be evaluated by this board set.
And personally, that's another one of the goals I want to, our board to pursue in this, this year. The next one for the chain of command is also one of my, highlights for this year. It's helpful to know, who does report to who and having that organized, information. I know that, there's always a question, the past few years, there's been some issues, figuring out, who does report to who has authority over, which employee, which department and whatnot, seeing how the many different departments are elected versus appointment, and things like that. So I know you probably ran into a lot of those issues.
Yeah, here's the interesting thing with the committee is that, some of the recommendations that we have here, there are committee members that we don't necessarily have firsthand knowledge or stories or information. We're reporting what was told to us.
Right.
So we, for us to sit here and tell you a story about, confusion with the org chart or things like that, I don't have one. But when it was a common theme when we spoke to department heads and employees. And again, don't get me wrong, it wasn't something that they came to the committee and they were complaining about that they don't know who to report to. But as we talked about specific situations or we talked about things, you could tell that there was some confusion as to, well, geez, if that came up, I actually don't know who would make that decision. So it's really just to kind of clarify, to make sure everybody not only understands their own role, but who ultimately they would report to in the event that something happened. And again, there is a difference between day-to-day operations, and that's something that this board's gonna need to flush out eventually, but there's a difference between day-to-day operations and then ultimately, statutory authority, and the Board of Health is a great example of that. Well, no one is gonna change the fact that the Board of Health has statutory authority over the decisions that they make, but recently, the town and the town administrator has taken over sort of administrative day-to-day, operation. And those are the kind of things that we think, the town as a whole needs to look at. It's a very decentralized government. There's, everybody has their own little piece, and when you have your own little piece and you put that on an org chart, everybody's reporting, every little piece is reporting to someone differently. And there's no good flow as to how people, are reporting, which allows for things like, the financial situations where you can't tell a specific department when to turn money in, because they say, well, you know, we don't report to this one, or we don't report to that
Exactly.
one. So I think just kind of streamlining and getting everybody on the same page with who they report to. And again, we don't necessarily have stories other than what was told to us, but I think it's safe to say that in some instances, the employees are confused as to ultimately who would make what decision.
Right, and it's different change of command, so it might be monetary, it might be human resources. So each, you know, there's multiple ones there, and looking into it, you know, it's better for the town as a whole. The next one, the increasing volunteers, and that's been a process we've been trying to work on for a long time. You know, I love seeing all your faces, but it seems like the same faces come up for each different committee, and it's, you know, it's hard to get new people to get involved, and that's something that we've been, you know, focusing on, and it's been our goals.
Yeah.
Since, you know, personally, I've been on the board, and I know it's been the goal of the board for, you know, a while now.
And to be quite honest with you, we don't really have we don't have a solution either. You know what I mean? It's it's a problem. It was noted to us as a problem. You know, we all know it's a problem. There's a lot of things that won't get done without volunteers, but how to increase that pool, your guess is as good as mine.
Right. And similar, on a similar page, they're basically increasing morale of the employees of the town. It's something that we've been aware of as a board, and it's been, this is letter F in the recommendations. As a board, you know, something we've been focused on, especially lately. And, you know, we've seen a lot of, you know, we've been working hard, you know, having those different events like Biggest Loser competitions, you know, just being, you know, being personally reaching out to the different employees of the town and seeing, you know, how are they, you know, how are they feeling, if they have any ideas. So that's something that we are keyed in for, and, you know, we'll continue to have that as a major priority for this board.
I would be remiss, I guess, if I didn't say it, but I think what you just said as far as, you know, you reaching out, I think that's important for the board as a whole. You know, the employees, they do have a lot of respect for the board, but they want to hear from you. They want to talk to you.
Right.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't say that.
Absolutely. Planning board director, restoring hours, that was done town meeting. That's letter G. H, employee evaluations. I know this board is currently in the middle of doing its town administrator evaluation. It's something I think going forward we will look more at a more year-to-year basis. But that's something, you know, we understand where you come from, where it's how do you figure out how well an employee is performing, and, you know, if there's could be improvement, or, you know, even on the flip side, you know, are they exceeding expectations? Should they be commended for, you know, what they're doing? They're going beyond duty.
If I may add, too often, I think, evaluations of any kind, board evaluations, employee evaluations, are seen as a negative, when it's quite opposite, of course. It's very important for that employee, and as a board, too, to do self-evaluations, so you know where you are and where you want to be and what you can improve upon. But again, I personally, and I think a lot of other people, look at it as a positive, and it's important to do on a regular basis.
Right. Any questions, comments on that one? Next one, the adoption of the consolidated departments for inspectional services. I know that goes along with the whole theme of, you know, a lot of employees in towns do such a good job, and you know, they work so much, they wear so many different hats that, you know, sometimes they can be prone to fatigue, you know, being overworked, having so many different responsibilities. I know this one would help with that. Oh, this is the centralizing.
Well, there's two recommendations within this. One is to hire a part-time local inspector to try to, you know, get some of the
Right.
inspection load off of the building commissioner. But then the second piece to that, the second recommendation is the adoption of General Law 43C, Section 13, which would create the Consolidated Department of Municipal Inspections. Again, this goes to what I talked about earlier, where, you know, the government is somewhat decentralized, so you have all these little pieces. So you have all of the local part-time inspectors that ultimately answer to the Board of Selectmen. And in the grand scheme of things, that really doesn't make any sense.
Right.
That the electrical inspector is answering to the Board of Selectmen, you know. So this would have all of the local inspectors answering and reporting to the building commissioner, so they could better coordinate inspections and things like that. The building commissioner had mentioned to us when we met with him you know, that one of the struggles that he has sometimes, and again, I don't wanna say this that there's a perception that there's a problem, because that wasn't reported, but you have the potential that, you know, someone could call the building commissioner's office, which is going to be the first place that they're going to call in the event that they're looking for a plumbing inspection or an electrical inspection or something like that. And when they ask the question about, you know, well, where is the electrical inspector, or when can he come, they can't answer that question, because the electrical inspector or the plumbing inspector books their own appointments. They sort of work autonomously outside that office. So if you did have a situation where a homeowner was looking for the electrical inspector, we'll use that as an example, and he was MIA, there's nothing that the building commissioner can do in terms of picking up the phone and saying, well, where are you? Why are you not calling this person back, or whatever the case may be? So, again, in order to kind of streamline things, it just makes sense that if you're going to have an inspectional services or a building, you know, a building inspector department, you have a building commissioner, everything inspection related, if you're talking about a chain of command, should funnel through the building commissioner's office, whether it's booking an appointment, answering a problem, fielding a question, whatever it may be. And the Consolidated Department of Inspectional Services would give you the ability to do that.
Right. And then just to help, you know, and other, you know, touch on the other subject of just, you know, lessening the burden of, you know, certain people. And that's also something you look at a regional, you know, a part-time local building inspector could also, you know, be considered for regional, you know, sharing their resources with another town. So we might not need a full-time person, but we can, you know, for half the time we share it with Oxford, Auburn, or whomever. And then the last one, the Strategic Action Planning Committee, if you want to briefly discuss that.
Sure. So what our thought process is, you know, the Board of Selectmen, if you chose to seek assistance to either implement some of these changes or come up with additional suggestions for you, you could put together a separate working group. As fun as this whole process was, you know, there's many of us that are not interested in moving on to that, you know, onto that next step. And in some respects, I think that's a good thing. You know, you had this group who worked hard over the last 9 months, you know, looking at this project, and our work is before you. And I think we all feel that, you know, at this point, our work is done. And if the board is gonna need continued assistance in whether it's, you know, brainstorming or, you know, draft policies or whatever it may be, we just feel that another group with a fresh set of eyes coming in to, you know, kind of pick up where we left off, may be of assistance to you. So again, the way that, you know, we worded the recommendation was that if you deem necessary, you know, that you could put together another working group. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But we at least wanted to make sure that that was an option for you.
Absolutely, and just thank you so much again, Mr. Coleman, Ms. Bewak, and everyone else on the board, on the committee who really put all this together. I think there's a lot of really good recommendations here, and it'll definitely keep us busy for the next year. And, you know, and once we, you know, come to next year, we can, you know, I think that's a more appropriate time to figure out exactly how we want to proceed, you know, with the ones that were not done, or if we need to, you know, discover or look at any more that we can do for the town. But so thank you so much for coming out again tonight. We really appreciate it. But before you go, does anyone on the board have any more questions, comments? Do you have any questions or comments for us?
Nope, we're all set.
Just a quick question. So moving forward, could you lay out the expectations again? I know you, do you anticipate forming a committee? I know we requested that you have the meeting, but it seems like we kind of did all the discussing. That it was kind of like another presentation the public presentation. I guess I wanted to hear more about what your thoughts were, and I think that was the overall impression of what this meeting would be. I could be wrong, but that was kind of my expectation. You kind of knew what from our report, what, you know, and we certainly are, again, thankful to be here and justify some of the responses and help the public understand what we went through and who we interviewed. But I guess I look back to you, our leadership. What's the plan?
Right, and like I said earlier, we're almost at our goals and objectives meetings, and some of these things that, you know, at least personally I'm putting forward to be as a goal for this year, such as, you know, looking, like I mentioned earlier, how about the HR department, the HR person, looking at so for that one, we look at what do the different department employees have right now, and, you know, figuring out what's the workload, what can we take, what could we consolidate in an HR person, and then, you know, make constables appointed. That's something that we would, I personally want to put forward to have us look at, you know, for a next town meeting, next annual town meeting, to have it on there and make it up to the townspeople. So personally, we would see, you know, set our goals next year to, you know, pursue some of these and to do the research needed for some of them, you know, figure out what resources we need, what money costs would be associated with it, what timeframes we would need, what legal actions we would have to take. So those would be included in our goals and objectives.
Which would be available for us to look at. Again,
Absolutely.
again, I just want to reiterate, this is, now the ball's in your court.
Right.
And we respect whatever it is you want to do. We just kind of want to know what the plan is, that's
Right.
all. And we don't, again, like Steve had mentioned early on, we just don't want to see it kind of go away.
Right, Mr. Swenson?
And if it does, that's perfectly okay, but it's your decision. Let me know, let us know.
I pushed hard to get this done, to get this committee done, and to work towards this. And to be perfectly honest, I think there are some great things in here. I think there are some things in here that I go, meh, and there are some things in there that I take issue with. And I think, like any of this type of report, I think there are things in here that are no-brainers that I think we probably will, again, I can't speak for the board, but certainly we'll bring up and discuss, and I think probably implement pretty quickly. I think there are some that have some real merit to them, and I think we'll certainly be discussing them during, as we set our goals and objectives for the coming year. One thing that jumped out at me, and one thing I was hoping for, is in your letter D, with issues with the chain of command. One of the things I was hoping to get from this was some recommendations on how we could improve we recognize, at least in my time as chair, I recognize that there are issues with the chain of command. I was kind of hoping for some ideas on steps that we could take, actions we could take to make improvements there.
And through the chair, great question. That's the whole idea why we recommended having that you appoint a strategic action planning committee to actually, there's so many details that would need to be worked out. I guess we kind of, and Steve, tell me if I'm wrong, anyone else in the committee envisioned handing you the recommendations, again, not just ours, and you've learned how we collected them, and you deciding, as the leadership of the community, which ones you think you want to move forward with, but not necessarily, we should all have input into how to move forward, but forming a committee to really iron out the details, because the devil's in the details. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. That's why Steve, I think, was saying, a lot of us have been there, kind of done that. We've called upon us for input, help, but it would probably need a whole nother energized group of volunteers to step forward, working collaboratively with the town leadership. I hope I'm making sense.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up, and I agree with Karen 100%. And we were very cautious of that, Mrs. Swenson, that we didn't want to be the group that recommended and told you how to do it.
Right.
Because I think we all felt that was two separate and distinct roles. You know, we didn't want to be the ones to point out the problems and tell you how to solve them, because we didn't want to kind of create the monopoly on how we were gonna, you know, to fix this. And the reality is, like Karen said, the devil's in the details. We would have needed another year's worth of work if we were gonna give you the solutions, you know, to that. So we felt our role, the way that town meeting established us, was to make the recommendations, point out the recommendations. But each one of those recommendations is gonna take a considerable, some less than others, I agree with you. But some of them are gonna take a considerable amount of work on their own in order to figure those out and make it. And we just didn't feel that was our role. We didn't wanna have the monopoly on how it was gonna be solved as well.
Right, but in summary recommendations, you do that, such as the consolidation of the inspector department. That's a chain of command, that's a reporting thing that you recommend solving. The creation of a finance director that could, with the access to set financial policies, that's would be recommendations to fix that chain of command, to fix that clarifying that chain of command. So it seems like you're doing it, but they're also not doing it.
Well, I think it's a matter of semantics. I mean, we're making a recommendation to consolidate the positions.
Right.
How we consolidate the positions in terms of the roles and responsibilities, we didn't touch that. So, I guess it's a matter of semantics. Yes, we've made some recommendations, but we're not getting into the weeds on how that recommendation is gonna be done.
Then, and I would just say, for whatever it's worth, that the committee came up with things that I think are great that I never would have thought of, which was one of the reasons I was hoping for, what are we missing? What are things out there that we should be looking at that we're not? And I think there are also things in here that at least speaking for myself, I saw in my time on the board as challenges, and you verified, these are things that need to be looked at. So I think from that perspective, having the outside eyes, it was definitely a valuable work for me as we go forward looking at these. So I appreciate the work that the committee did.
Appreciate those comments, thank you.
Mr. Singer, did you have a question? I know you raised your hand a while ago.
It really wasn't a question, it was a statement, but at this point, I'm just reiterating everybody else.
Right.
But no, I mean, 9 months is no small feat, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of hours. And for me personally, and I can never speak for an entire board, but I appreciate the work, and I look at this, and I see a big list of recommendations. And for me, I don't see why we couldn't work to try and get a lot of this stuff done, hopefully within the next year, so you guys can see results of the labor you put in.
Absolutely. And hopefully that answers your question, Ms. Biwak. And I know you asked earlier about are the results of our goals and objectives being, that's a public meeting, so they'll be posted online, they'll be posted on minutes, so you'll see what our goals and objectives for the following year will be. And one thing the board one change the board wants to do is revisit those goals and objectives on a quarterly basis. Usually we'll review it maybe after a year or half a year. So you want to have a more updated and be more proactive on looking at, are you accomplishing our goals? And these definitely will, in some manner, be a part of those.
Right, and I would hope that we can get a lot of these recommendations on a list to become goals and objectives for
Absolutely.
the year.
So as we're putting together a list, I would recommend saying the ones you want to bring forward and putting those on a list for our next meeting. So, any more discussion from the board, the committee,
Thank you for the opportunity.
from the crowd? Thank you so much again. We've been saying, we really appreciate all the hard work you put into this, and definitely, we hope that you'll be available if we have any questions. But you're free to go.
With that, we go back to
So,
E, volunteers.
We're not a standing committee, we're all done, right? So it's-
We're available, but we're not 9 months available.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Have a
again.
good
Thank you.
night. Thank you.
So with that, we will go to new business item. Hopefully, Mr. Singer doesn't die.
Sorry.
But we'll move to item number 3 under new business, the interdepartmental transfers. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a list of transfer requests. Most of them are within their own departments. The fire chief, who just stepped out, which I would wait till
He
he
just
comes
stepped
back
in.
before I
Just
talk
stepped
to him about him.
You heard his name.
The fire chief is requesting $46,558 from the reserve fund, and that must be approved by the finance committee. I would recommend that you vote to approve all the transfer requests pending approval of the finance committee. They will be meeting June 29th to vote on the requested transfers, and also, as I mentioned in my TA report, you have a meeting for next week, which is your goals and objectives, and if we have any other things, we'll bring that to you, and then have a consolidated request for the finance committee.
Right.
So, I think because the largest one is the chief, I asked him if he would come and break this down for you about what his deficit is.
Chief Louis, if you want to mention that, it is a pretty large number, pretty unexpected, but if you want to, explain, why it
Yeah.
is the way it is.
No, we expected some folks to be back from injured on duty operations, that's for sure. That was the major component of it. We've also had one firefighter that has recently had a new addition to the family, which was unexpected on our end for the Family Medical Leave Act, so he's out as well. And we also had some large events that happened in town that caused some quite extensive amount of overtime and some operational changes to get things done to make those events happen. So we're out here now in front of it, trying to look and make sure that we were able to finish out the year, obviously, to make sure that we have enough funding to get through our wages component in the department. Obviously, we've been super busy. We are up, our revenues are up over 200,000 from last year. We've already deposited over $1 million in ambulance revenues last year, for this year. So that's a good thing. And our call volume is up 13% as well. The 4 new positions couldn't come as soon as they can. We've also gotten 84 applicants, which I think is fantastic. That says an awful lot for our community. And I think those are really, really great things for the department, you know, and moving forward. We easily could cut these numbers down, obviously, by being able to have our staff, you know, up and operational and getting folks on board and bring those numbers down, obviously. So that's a good thing.
Mr. Swenson?
Chief, do you have any idea what your overtime number is gonna be for this current fiscal year?
Yeah, we're upwards of about 210,000 in overtime that we've spent this year in overtime. That's why the big need for the new staff coming in. We could easily cut that in half,
Cutting that in half would negate,
probably.
In the
some-
future.
Yes,
hopefully.
yes. That's a good thing. We will be able to give you a monthly report, or even sooner if you want. Be able to tell you exactly where we are with the new staff on board, where they're filling in those holes, where they're filling in those slots where we need to get people. We called mutual aid again today for an ambulance, and we lost revenue there again today. We lost revenue yesterday twice because we just don't have the staff. These are those things.
If I could.
Yep.
I think you made a great suggestion. I think if we could watch, particularly overtime,
Mhm.
how that's impacted once the new guys are on, because there are a lot of eyes that are watching this,
We are,
putting these people on. So if we could show as quickly as we can that it's having a positive impact on reducing overtime.
we have, like I said, 84 applicants. We have 20 of them being interviewed tomorrow. We have an exam on the 30th of June that they have to sit through, a second interview panel process, and then be able to get them hired. I'm sure that some of them may have to give maybe 30 days notice to their current employer. We're not sure of that. So there is going to be a little bit of time to get those folks in. There's a 2-week orientation period we have to get them. So consequently, every single shift, every single operation that they do, every single mutual aid call that we did not have to call ambulance for or something for, those things are gonna be tracked. Those dollar figures will be able to be available every single month, and we'll have that report monthly. And obviously, I understand that we are looking to see where those numbers are gonna flush out, but I am very confident with the staff that we have to be able to make these changes happen in the positive momentum.
Chief, you know, this number is pretty significant. Do you think this would impact, you know, as everyone's aware, we just got through town meeting. Do you know if this, you know, all these unknowns possibly might continue into the future, it might impact your budget for next year?
We certainly hope not, obviously, but, you know, having children is an interesting thing. It can happen. And there is new, you know, Family Medical Leave Act that we do not put in our budget. Obviously, that's something that we don't put in. Injuries are also something that we don't plan for. If they happen, they happen. I'm hoping that by having more staff to be able to cut that injury component down, because we'll have enough people to a degree to do things safely and make sure that nobody gets hurt. And the other component is you can't plan for every single large event. So those are my 3 components that we do our best with the budget that we have and continue to you know, provide the service to the community. That's what we are expected, I'm sure, of to do.
Thank you. Does anyone on board have any questions for the chief?
Just a comment, if I could.
Absolutely.
I'm concerned that there are too many people in this room that have really good tans. That they're working so hard. I just see way too many good tans in this room right now.
No, it's nice to be able to get away for a couple of days.
Sure it
And
is.
the Father's Day was a nice weekend, so.
I guess I do have one last question, if I could.
Mr. Swenson?
Do you track at all, Chief, ambulance calls that you haven't been able to take due to staffing?
That's correct, we have been, and that's where we came up with those numbers last year. We came up with easily a significant amount of money, and I don't want to say a number off the top of my head because I don't remember it.
That's fine.
But it was a significant amount of money that we have lost throughout the time when we were tracking that operation. And we still currently track them.
And do we have all 3 ambulances currently in service that could be used?
All 3, Mike, are running today?
Yes, one
Yeah. Okay, yep.
So it's a
Yes,
day
all
by
three
day.
of them, yes, we have two apparatus, 2010s, and our ambulance one's been giving us some fits and starts, so it's day-to-day operations if that's in or out, and sometimes hour-to-hour operations, so that's why I conferred to Mike on that. But yes, we do have 3 ambulances that are operational, and we do our best to keep them operational as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments for the chief? Not, what are the board's wishes with the list of end-of-year transfers?
I would move that we recommend the transfer of $46,458 to the fire salaries and wages account from the reserve fund.
Do we wanna do this as a whole?
I feel comfortable doing the salaries one first and then the rest as a separate motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, chief, for coming out and, explaining.
You're very welcome. Obviously, the other component is there was one above that for 3,000 to move over as well. I'm guessing that you would be changing that to your regular motion, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, chief. And what are the board's wishes for the rest of the transfer requests? If you had time to look it over.
I would recommend approval of the transfer request as listed in the memorandum.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank Gene Ferrari, our town accountant, for assisting us in this. He's put a lot of hours in here today, doing some back checking, so
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
All right, with that, does anyone, we have no items under old business. Does anyone have any policy review or committee reports? No? We did the town administrator's report. I just want to take a moment to thank the town administrator for coming in during her vacation to make sure things are running smooth. We really appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
You also have a nice tan as well.
Mary sat down with the accountant and the fire chief.
With that, is there any other business? There's unknown time posting from the board. Any announcements, comments, bad jokes? No one? All right, well then, our next regular select meeting will be July 5th. We have a goals and objective meetings next week, and I, once again, I have to make sure you get the list of recommendations and goals for that meeting, organized and sent in, so we can organize that. But we will be entering executive session, and we'll be exiting executive session solely for the purpose of adjournment. If someone would like to make that motion, go into executive session.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Cooper?
I make a motion that we enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, Number 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. And number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body.
And the chair does declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiation position of the public body. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion is second. We'll do this by roll call vote. Ms. Cooper?
Aye.
Mr. Swenson?
Aye.
Mr. Singer?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're now in executive session. We'll be exiting executive session solely for the purpose of adjournment. Once again, thank you, Chris, for doing a great job on the cameras. With that, our next meeting will be July 5th. With that, good night.